Dialogue between the Spirits of a Poet and a Drunkard, by John Dunne, 1659 1733. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Drunkard. Well met, brother. Which way is your flight designed? Poet. I have just left the bosom of causes, to take a prospect of the lower world, to see if there be any preparation for my reception there. And yet I'm much troubled at the apprehension of being clogged with the uneasy, restless lump of humanity, and the attending consequences make me very impatient. Drunkard. Why so? What conjectures have ye? Poet. 'Tis the want of reasonable conjectures. For by all the observations I can make of my temper, I cannot resolve myself whether I am a male or a female spirit. But why do I thus busy myself about sexes? Certainly 'tis ominous, and argues my embodying near at hand. But if, after 6,000 years' expectation, I should be tied to a poet, I shall reckon it a forestalling my damnation, and had e'en as good commence devil, without any more ado, and take up with one hell. See you not that wretch in yonder grove, with his hat over his eyes, scratching his head, tearing his nails, and sending his poor hackneyed soul about like a spaniel dog, to fetch and carry similitudes, rhymes, composition, fiction, etc.? I remember about 30 years since, when he was our companion, he would sometimes break off in the middle of a discourse without bidding good bye, and away to the brooks, groves, and fountains, which made me suspect the nearness of a poetic preferment. But hark, the humour of our late companion in his new lodging. When formless and inanimate I lay, sleeping in chaos with my fellow clay, or o'er those teeming particles had met, to make this wretched composition so complete, without my knowledge or concurrence, thou biddest me awake and live. Well, what then? Why, the sense is out before the rhyme. Now 'twould be charitable to assume an airy organ, and help him out, namely, I know not how. Poor wretch! He knows not what to do, unless he undoes all, and begins again, which he'd as lieve be hanged as attempt, having taken so much pains about it already. Oh, but for Sisyphus' restless stone, or Bilides' leaking tun, they are minute and petite tasks to his. Not Ixion's wheel has half the torture of an over-hasty period. But this is not all. When he has undergone the bitter throes and pains of rhymeship, then the darling offspring of his brain turns prostitute to the abuses of all the world. The praises of wise men are so few that their voice is lost in so large a theatre, and numerous applauses of fools are too loud a scandal. And after all this, 'tis not pity the poor rogue should take such pains to be damned. For there is not one poet in 5,000 that escapes. It had gone hard with Oldham himself, if it had not been for the penance of his own satyrs. Say, fellow immateriality, what shall I do? I can never look down upon a couple of lovers, but I'm afraid their toying will end in making an Halcyonian prison for me, especially if the inamorato is for balls, masquerading, and love sonnets. Drunkard. Alas, brother, I'm all resentment and pity. Little do mortals think what plague we are at, about the lodging and entertainment we expect at their hands. But for my part, your apprehensions of incorporation are all charms and sweetness to the dismal reception I look for. Poet. Why, what's the matter with you? Drunkard. I can never leave our happier regions to visit the lower elements, but before I am aware, I find myself amongst sea fowl, hovering over rivers, ponds, and marshes, admiring the scaly shoals, and envying the pastime of those ever thrifty revellers. Now what can this mean, but that I'm ordained to actuate a drunkard? And if so, hell is a toy to such a confinement. This moment would I plunge into the boundless depths to be secured from such a companion. But why that rash thought? Is not hell also crowded with them? And are not its horrors doubled by their concession? Yet, if hell could be hell without 'em, 'twould be a happy place, and nothing in it of the beast, antic, or nonsense, but a rational complaint of despair. Wonder not, dear brother, at my deeper reflections, till you've considered yonder figure at the old D Tavern. What think you of their motions, converse, and passions? Suppose all their discourse were taken in shorthand, and the weakest person amongst 'em should have a view of the whole when he's in a mood of thinking. Would not he blush at such follies, at such an unaccountable expense of time? Especially if he thought an hour so spent was of equal length with any other hour in the line of life, and must be equally accounted for. Alas! Who would suppose that souls cloistered up in these sensualized, unthinking statues were ever our companions? Come, let's retire towards our peaceful regions, and be not witnesses of what a midnight scene produces. A poet's structure, a fade of a poetic mansion. 'Tis a paradise to what I dread. Nor is there any spirit in all our order that can be afraid of such a body, but I must meet with it in this epitome of all plagues. A drunkard can be poet, beggar, cully, buffoon, or anything, so that I'm like to meet with the most abject slavery in nature. End of Dialogue between the Spirits of a Poet and a Drunkard, by John Dunne, 1659 to 1733.